My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. So for today's show, I wanted to talk about the major barriers that it takes that you need to get past in order to have a long-term happy relationship. And I was up to about 4 or 5 barriers at the time. Then I decided that let me knock it down to one, at least for today's show. Because the first barrier is so important and it needs to be talked about in a fair amount of depth that it just is not going to leave a lot of time to deal with the other ones. And it's a very difficult one to talk about. So in order to have a long-term happy relationship, we have to consider this, especially if we're in one, is that it may be possible that you chose the wrong partner. And why is that a possibility? And it's because that maybe you are not really the right partner yourself yet. And that could cloud your vision, so you would choose somebody that's not right for you, or you're not right to be in a relationship at this point. The other reason I can see is that you might not be using the correct criteria in order to choose a partner. It's very difficult to choose the right partner, especially if we're talking about a really long-term relationship. So I want to go through about 8 or 9 reasons why it's difficult to choose a partner. And then I want to go through an awareness exercise that should help. So let's start with this, number 1. The reason why it's difficult to choose a long-term partner, it may be because you're not that happy yourself. And we have to take a look at that. Because a relationship is where we go to put our happiness and to share our happiness. And if you're expecting to get it from another person, you're really going to cause a lot of stress in that relationship. So number 2, I would also say, if you're not fulfilled in your life, it's really difficult to choose the correct partner. Now, somebody might say, well, what's the difference, right? It's very similar. Are you fulfilled or are you happy? And I can say from my own experience that because I'm a perfectionist and because I always want to do better, even when I do well, I still want to do better, that I tend not to be overly happy all the time. So I can literally say I may not be generally happy all the time, especially with the state of the world. But I can tell you this, I'm definitely fulfilled. And that's because almost every minute of every day I spend doing something that has meaning and purpose for me, and it's something that I want to do. And I'm very fortunate in that regard because there's a lot of people out there that work full-time jobs that do things just for money and because they have to, but they don't love what they do. And I happen to be one of those people that never put money first. I always decided, well, what do I like? And then I figured out how to become valuable in the things that I like, and then I made money from it. So I would say overall, I'm incredibly fulfilled, more than any person should ever have the right to be. But on the other hand, I'm not incredibly happy. So the number 3 problem in trying to pick a person for a long-term relationship is this. You can't expect a person to do the job for you, to make you happy, that is rightly the responsibility of yourself. And it's also on how you connect with the world. Because I think in today's society, we expect people in long-term relationships to be, it's almost like a jail sentence. You're with one person, and you should never have any contact with any other human beings, or whether that be in business or just in your own social life. Now, I'm reminded of a story, and I forget who said it, but I believe it was a rabbi, and he was talking to a boy, and the boy was eating fish. And he says to the boy, he says, why are you eating the fish? And the boy says, well, because I love fish. And the rabbi says, you don't love fish. You caught it, you killed it, and you boiled it, and you ate it. What you like is yourself. You're using something else to meet your needs. Because if you love the fish, you would have let it be free. You would let it do its own thing. And I think that's what we see a lot in relationships where we're expected in a relationship to almost jail another human being and not allow them the freedom to be who they need to be. So again, it's really difficult to choose a person to be happy with in a long-term relationship if you truly believe that that person is only yours and is not part of the universe. Number 4, it's extremely hard to choose somebody for a long-term relationship if you generally don't have trust in other human beings. Because if you don't trust another person and you're always looking for the shoe to drop, so to speak, it's very hard to be vulnerable with somebody. And if you can't be vulnerable with somebody, you're going to have a lot of difficulty building up intimacy that would be needed to be happy in a long-term relationship. And on the other side of that, if someone has incredible distrust in people, in society in general, part of that can be a projection where they don't feel that trustworthy themselves because they know somewhere deep down inside they're not giving all of themselves. So again, all of this can be worked on. So when I'm saying you may have picked the wrong person or you may be the wrong person, that might be temporary. And that's the reason for this show, is because if we have awareness, we can look at it and we can all improve. But again, if you don't trust people, it is going to be a very difficult uphill battle in order to have a happy long-term relationship. Number 5, if you have the need to control others so you can manage your own emotions, again, relationships have this incredible way of magnifying the weaknesses in both partners. And if you can't manage your own emotions on your own, and you go into a relationship, no matter how much you love the other person, you're going to end up trying to control that other person because it's easier to do that than it is to manage your own emotions. And of course, that's not going to make the other person feel loved and cared about. So again, that's going to cause some difficulty. And that's the negative. On the positive, is it fixable? Of course it is. Number 6, anger management issues. If you're generally a person that has underlying anger, I would actually say that that's not a problem. I think anger it's an emotion that sometimes is warranted and it's needed, especially if people are oppressed, or if you're oppressed, if you feel like you're not getting the deal that you need in life. It's okay to be angry. And I don't have a problem with the feeling or the emotion of anger. What I would pay more attention to is the behavioral aspect of it. Is that if you feel anger and the behaviors that you use are destructive to yourself, to your partner, or to the world, we really have to take a look at that. Because if we don't, again, it's going to be very difficult to have a long-term happy relationship. And number 7, I would say if you live in distraction, or you live in a world where you want to check out, where you want to numb yourself, where you might be addicted, I think at that point, a partner has every right not to be in the relationship at all. Now, I'm not talking about somebody who's trying to recover from addiction or try to get better from it. I'm talking about people who are in active addiction who don't want to do anything about it. At that point, the person is having more of a relationship with whatever they're trying to distract themselves with than their partner. And I think, like I said, there might be some physical abuse that goes along with that, some verbal abuse, and certainly there's not a lot of emotional connection. So at that point, I think somebody would be in their rights, of course, to leave a relationship like that. And number 8, the biggie of all, and this is where the show's really going to start here. I think we all need to be intimately aware of our childhood traumas and our attachment styles. Now, I don't think we need to resolve all of our traumas. I think that would be impossible. I don't think anybody truly does that completely. I think we can manage our traumas, and we need awareness so we can make decisions out of strength and not weakness. And as Carl Jung would say, we need to make our unconscious become conscious so we can make good decisions. And I want to go over an exercise with you to show you that whether you know it or not, even for myself, and it's kind of embarrassing, that I've made a lot of decisions in my life based on my unconscious until you really look at it. And again, that's another big reason of why it's hard to pick people for a long-term relationship when you're not consciously making decisions and you're not making decisions out of strength. So in this awareness exercise, what you want to do, you want to go back to your childhood and you want to look at your environment, and you want to look at your relationships, more specifically the relationship that you saw your mother and father have, and then you want to look at the relationship that you had as an individual with your mother and father. And when we put all that together, what we're going to do is we're going to make two divisions here, because the unconscious mind looks at two basic things. We look at familiarity in a relationship, not maybe something that is beneficial or productive to us, but familiar. So again, from an unconscious level, we have to know what our brain is looking at in terms of familiarity, because the familiarity may be something that's very negative. The other thing we need to look at is when we try to complete ourselves through the use of another human being. And again, we do this very unconsciously, so if we can take a look at it and write it down, we're going to have a much more conscious thought and effort when we make our decisions. So I have my trusty list right here. I'm going to read off of it so I don't mess it up. And again, this is a quick little thing I did for myself. It's not perfect, but the reason why I want to do this is to give other people out there an idea of how to do it, and so you can write out your own list and then you could figure it out for yourself. So here is my history. Here's the relationship that I saw between my parents. Number one, they were emotionally distant with each other. I never saw my mother or father compliment each other. I've never seen physical affection between my parents, ever. But also on that list, my father was 15 when he met my mother, who was 12, and they had a friendly relationship up until the day they died. So that was they've had a 60-year friendship. So what do I learn from that? What I learned from that is that, what does love look to me? It looks to me like you're there and you care and you're there all the time, but you don't necessarily show much affection physically, and you don't really compliment people. That's kind of what I'm used to. Now let's take a look at the relationship between me and my mother. Now, being as honest as I can, I believe my mother gave me full emotional support. I was praised all the time. My mother put me on a pedestal. And she always said I was the best looking boy, and I always said, well, where does Dad fit in? And my father, she would always say my father was the best looking man. So to me, that was normal. And as you can hear, my dog's barking in the background, but I'm going to try to go through this here. At my house, there were no rules. Again, I didn't need any rules because I was always so afraid to disappoint my mother that I never really did anything wrong. I was that kid who excelled in all sports. I got mostly straight A's in school. I never got in trouble. So my mother never needed to make any rules for me. This is because I never wanted to disappoint her. I wanted to make her proud at all costs. I wanted to be the one area of her life that she didn't have to worry about, because my parents got divorced when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And honestly, I was there for my mother's emotional support a lot of times, because I would see her in how she reacted with my father when she was alone, and she would cry and I would go and comfort her. So a lot of times I was the man of the house, starting from when I was 6 or 7 years old. I would again comfort my mom, and that's when I started trying to be perfect all the time so she could never have any reason to be disappointed. And my own personal emotions were suppressed most of the time because I didn't want her to worry about me. I was too worried about her. Now, when you're a heterosexual man, when you're looking at the relationship with your mother, you're looking at what a romantic template would be. So on the other side of that, the role model template would be the relationship I had with my father. And the relationship I had with my father, I would say that he was a very hardworking guy. He was very dependable. He was a loyal person. But again, zero affection and almost no compliments whatsoever. And the other part of it is, the only time we ever really connected on anything, I would say, is that, he would talk to me about sex, and he would be open with that. And so I saw my father as kind of like a sexual mechanic in a sense, because he never talked about love, and he never talked about, you know, being nice and caring and compliments and flowers and candy and being affectionate, holding hands, nothing like that. But he would always, you know, challenge me with somebody else to see how long can you last in bed, how many orgasms can you give. So it was very sexually mechanical, and that was about it, but not from a psychological loving type thing. So as we look at this, what parts do I have here? So we got the two parts that I said from the beginning. There's a part of you unconsciously that wants to complete you, and unconsciously there's a part that looks for familiarity. So for me in my completion, being that I am mostly shy and I'm introverted, and I was not allowed to be, let's say, emotional or open about myself, because I had to make myself smaller to make everybody else feel better. My completion is unconsciously I end up looking for people who are very open, who are very emotional, who are very extroverted, very verbal, people who tend to praise me a lot, compliment me a lot, and show me a lot of affection, and they tend to be overly dramatic about life. Now the familiarity part is I tend to unconsciously look for people who look up to me, who it's easier for me to make them proud, who are non-confrontational to me, who give me full emotional support, people who give me no rules. They don't tell me what to do, they leave me alone because I basically do everything right to begin with. So again, it's like with my mother, I don't feel like I need somebody to watch over me all the time. I'm going to be a successful person on my own. I don't see another reason for somebody to clamp down on me. And of course, I look for someone who is a cheerleader, who tends to praise me and compliment me a lot. Now, let me go back a little bit. Where does a lot of this come from? And now I'm going to use the work of Dr. Firestone. And I want to use this because I don't want people to think this is just me and my thoughts. There's a lot to back this up. So I'm going to actually read part of what she wrote. And this is her words right here. She said, parents who don't meet each other's emotional needs frequently turn to their kids for support. Let me step in here. That's true. Both of my parents really were not people who got their emotional needs from life or between each other or from the world. So their emotional support did come from the kids, and their happiness came from us. Though often unconscious, this places an unnatural and destructive burden on a child. When parents feel happy and fulfilled in themselves and in their adult relationships, they are less likely to pull on their kids. When parents' own emotional needs are met, they offer their children a sense of stability and security from which to experience the world. And again, I agree 100% with Dr. Firestone, but let me add, because of this situation that I just mentioned, I don't think I've ever experienced stability or security. Not that I wasn't secure or stable in their love for me, but in terms of life in general and in their happiness. So I always felt like I needed to step up to entertain them or to make them happy. In the last part of Dr. Firestone's work, she says, a parent's happiness allows children to feel happy and to trust that parent to meet their emotional needs. And again, I would say that didn't happen. I was there most of the time, again, unconsciously. I didn't know it at the time, but I felt like I was there to meet my parents' emotional needs. And what is this really called? I mean, I could do many shows just based on this one subject, but let's just talk about this. It's called perfectionism. And what is perfectionism, actually? Well, it's a way to avoid shame. It's a way to avoid unnecessary criticism. It's a way to avoid ridicule. It's to always be above reproach. It's to be in a situation where nobody could say anything negative about you. Even if you're in a family that gets made fun of because you don't have enough money or because you're from a quote unquote a broken family. So I took this on as myself. So it's very natural for me to be overly responsible in relationships. So going back to finish the awareness exercise, here is the reason why you want to be conscious. Because you definitely don't want to make unconscious decisions. Because let's take a look at the big 5 personality traits. And knowing what I just told you about my unconscious thought for completion, or to complete myself, or for my familiarity, this is what I end up with. I would be attracted to people who are very open to experience, people who are very low on the conscientiousness scale, people who are very high on extroversion, and let's just go with those 3. All of those has to do with me not being able to express myself and me not being able to open up. So I have an unconscious need to put other people in my life to do the dirty work for me. So again, people who are very open to experience, people who are not doing the right thing at the right time, and people who are very extroverted, all the opposite of me. Also high on the agreeableness scale that I would ask for. And why would that be? Well, I am used to that because I was raised by my mom who never gave me any rules. So I don't see any reason, if I'm trying to be a perfectionist, I see it as almost an extreme hurt or just a very negative thing to do to start trying to put me down or correct me when I'm a perfectionist to start with. So I would definitely look for someone who is agreeable. And because I was never allowed to show emotion, my unconscious drive would be is that I would feel comfortable around someone who's pretty well neurotic, which means that they're emotionally unstable. So here you go. And this is why I want everybody to do this test, because if you ask yourself what your environment was, and again, what you're familiar with, and how you want to complete yourself through another person, it's okay, but we need to do this from a conscious point of view. Because if I were to do this unconsciously, and I were to pick a person like this, it would be an absolute disaster. That's why I need to be able to look at that and say, no, I do want a conscientious person, like a job would be nice, having care about the world would be nice. Open to experience, yeah, to a degree, but not that open to experience. So anyway, I hope you do this awareness exercise, and I hope this show has been good for you and gave you some good ideas. I'm Joe Peroni from the Rise Above Project. If you like the show, please like it, and even better, subscribe, and even better than that, please send it to a friend. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening.